They were good.
Oh,
Yeah.
It was high tech at that
I
time.
think first General Hot Wing, they were very good.
This stuff's expensive, so.
Good evening, everybody.
Okay, well,
Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? I think we're going to go ahead and get started. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel later. Some announcements for upcoming events. On March 2nd at 2:30, the South Central Pennsylvania Genealogical Society will be meeting, and Richard Conkle will be presenting History and Genealogy of New Sweden. On March 4th, from 10 to 12, the Friends of the York County History Center will present Fastnacht Day. On March 6th at 7, we'll have Writers Roundtable, and Norina Bensel will discuss her book on the 2001 North Hopewell Winterstown Elementary School tragedy. On March 9th at 1 p.m., the York County History Center will present The Preachers, the People, and the Praise, a history of York's Black churches with Samantha Dorm. On March 12th at 6, the York County History Center will present PA Women and Voting Rights with Amanda Owen of the Justice Bell Foundation. And then lastly, on March 19th at 7, we'll have the Civil War Roundtable, and Dominish Marie Miller will present The Not So Invisible Women, the Daughters of Charity, Contributions During and After the Battle of Gettysburg. And our speaker tonight is Robin Fisher, who served in the Army from 1969 to 1972, working as a liaison with the Vietnamese Military Security Service in Vietnam. So please welcome Robin Fisher.
thank you. My story is probably a little bit different than other stories you've heard from Vietnam. I'm going to give you a little bit of my background first, and then go through everything. I was born in Riverdale, Maryland in 1948. I grew up in Center County, Spring Mills, Pennsylvania, rural area. I have a younger brother who's a retired fire commissioner for Lebanon City, and a younger sister who's a retired Penn State Department budget manager. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. My father's career military. During World War II, he was in the 325th Fighter Group, Army Air Corps, and he was a communications officer in North Africa and Italy between 43 and 47. After World War II, he was assigned to the Pentagon. He resigned his commission there in 1950 and enlisted in the Pennsylvania Air National Guard in order to help create the 112th Aircraft Controlled Flight Unit. The Pennsylvania Air National Guard served in Korea and served during the Berlin airlift, and he ended up commanding he started out as a tech sergeant, ended up commanding the 112th ACW, and retired in 1974 with the rank of Brigadier General. I grew up, we owned a farm it wasn't really a farm, it was just country land in Penns Valley. And I graduated in 1966 from Penns Valley High School. I did 66 to 67, I was my freshman year at Penn State. And then in 67, 68, I was a VISTA volunteer, Volunteers in Service to America. I was one of the 2 youngest volunteers that they ever had. And I served in Port Norris, New Jersey, working with seasonal workers in a place called Shell Pile. So we did a lot of providing social services, tutoring to the youth activities, and it created a mobile library, which the county library system took over after I left. After discussing it with my father, I signed up for early enlistment to take place at the end of my VISTA obligation. My father suggested the Navy and the Air Force for the food. I enlisted in the Army for military intelligence, and I volunteered for Vietnam. I reported in Indiantown Gap in March of '69 and was sent to Fort Dix for basic training. Probably the standard basic training that everybody else had, except for our night encampment exercise was halted when I discovered that I was a platoon leader, and I discovered that my platoon, I was given live ammunition. So we had 2 ammo boxes of live ammunition. I had to find the drill sergeants real quick and tell them this is not what we're supposed to be using. So they shut down the night exercise, we all got a good night's sleep, and continued basic training from there on. At the end of basic training, I was probably in the best condition of my life after I got out of basic training. I think a lot of fellows that I know were in that same boat. After basic training, I was assigned to Fort Holabird. Fort Holabird was in Dundalk, Maryland. It was the military intelligence school in 1969. In 1971, the school was moved to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and that's where it is today. While waiting for my group classes, I was assigned as a baker's helper. My working hours were 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., which gave me a lot of free time because I could schedule my own sleeping at time and stuff like that. But I didn't get woken up. I didn't have to report to anywhere. I didn't have to do any of the routine activities to clean up or anything else. I didn't have to do KP duty and everything else. So my own sleep schedule, I spent a lot of time at the gym and a lot of time in the library, and some time wandering around downtown Baltimore. The baker's helper, I made pies, cakes, and donuts for the hundreds of troops attending the classes. The actual class was 15 weeks, and that included typing class, which I was terrible at. I only typed with 2 fingers. I typed fast and correct, but just with 2 fingers. I typed enough to be able to get through the class. Report writing was typical military intelligence report writing they had to do. Interrogation, surveillance, and counterintelligence operations. Some of the surveillance took place in Baltimore, where we followed people around, going through Lexington Market, going downtown through the harbor area and everything else for our exercises. After that 15-week course, I finished there and was assigned to Vietnamese language school at Fort Bliss, Texas, which is part of the actual schools at Biggs Field, which is just outside of El Paso, Texas. That was a 47-week class and included language training, cultural studies, province and village politics, and outdoor exercise at a Vietnamese village. Most of the classes were taught by Vietnamese individuals for the language and the cultural studies, things like that. The Vietnamese village was handled by some Vietnam veteran Green Berets. They take us out and do different types of exercises, going through the village, finding supposed VCs and doing interrogations and things like that. So it was a little bit different. The language, the Vietnamese language, is not the easiest language in the world, I don't think, because but on the other side, they thought English was not very easy either. But it's a lot of tonal implications that you have to use. So keeping those inflections straight is the hardest part. But I was able to get through the school, and I ended up with a MOS of the 97B4 LVS, which was military intelligence, counterintelligence operations. Some of the highlights, that 47 weeks in El Paso or Biggs Field, it's right on the edge of the desert, so there was a lot of interesting things going on. In torrential downpours, the first floor of our barracks, the hallways would be filled with scorpions. So we take push brooms and just push the scorpions out to the end of the hallway and back out into the desert. But they'd come in from all over the place. We had, after a torrential storm, you had to go make sure you go through all your boots and everything else, make sure there weren't any scorpions hanging around. But we used push brooms and got them out. We also, my roommates and I made a mistake of leaving our windows open one day, and there was a rainstorm. In the desert, the sand blows and the rain hits the sand and you end up with mud. Our whole room was coated with mud. We hosed the thing down in order to clean it up because it was covered with mud. We did get to go to get passes, and we went to Juarez, which was right across the border. We also went camping one time to the mountains, the Ruidoso Mountains, just in New Mexico, and everything was fine. We got there, it was nice weather. We woke up the next morning and there were 2 feet of snow. Different experience there. I was there, like I said, 47 weeks. I had my leave was at the end of December. I went home, and I had to fly out of State College to go to Pittsburgh to get a flight to Oakland, where I'm heading back to heading for Vietnam. One neat thing that happened to me on that trip was the State College to Pittsburgh flight. I was on the plane with Joe Paterno, so I got to sit down and talk with him. He was very nice and very appreciative of what I was doing as far as being in the service. In January of 71, I arrived at Tunstall Air Base as an E5 and processed through Long Bin. It was assigned to the MACV 572nd Military Intelligence in the Trang. If you don't know if you're, it's going to be hard to see, I'll lay this up here. This is a map that I found from Vietnam. I was assigned, the Trang is right here. The Trang Air Base is right here. This is 2 Corps. I was in 2 Corps. This is all 2 Corps. I Corps up here, 2 Corps, 3 Corps, 4 Corps. So the Trang was the area where I went to there. That was the 18th CI detachment. From the 572nd Detachment headquarters was in the Trang. That's where I received my M16 and I received a .45 pistol. That's also where they gave me documentation as a first lieutenant. So I went from an E5 to a first lieutenant just by showing up in that area. So they had to take my fatigues, strip off all the sergeant insignia and everything, put the lieutenant bars, and they also put in infantry bars on there too. So I was not in intelligence. I was a first lieutenant in the infantry, but I was working in the intelligence. I was sent to the 18th CI detachment in Bami Tuat. Bami Tuat is in Darmok province, which is right here, and it covers right against the one of the larger provinces in the area, and was right up against the Cambodian border. I was assigned as a liaison to the ARVN Military and Security Service. The 18th Detachment in Bami Tuat was housed in a villa downtown across the street from the CIA house. So we got to know the CIA operators along with all the time. There was about 5 or 6 of those guys. Been there for quite a while. When I arrived, the villa was full. There was a full operation going on then. So the overflow was housed at Camp Coryell Army Airfield. Camp Coryell was a combination Air Force, Army base that was base camp for the 155th Assault Helicopter Company, a light plane scout and surveillance company, and the U.S. Air Force Control Squadron Detachment for the Central Highlands. They basically did all the radar control for all airplanes and everything in 2 Corps. When I arrived, the CIA at the 18th was under the command of a young 20-something infantry captain who had he'd already served 2 tours in Vietnam, and had a field promotion to first lieutenant. So he was the one who was commanding our MI station. And he was quite a character. I'm sorry I don't remember names. I'm terrible with names. I should have written things down when they were happening, but I don't remember his name. But he took us out in the countryside to show us the area and everything else, and also took us out to practice with our firearms. So we got used to shooting the .45 pistol, which I hadn't done before. And he was really good with an M79 grenade launcher. He would take that M79 and he'd drop the grenade in a 50-gallon drum barrel. From 50 yards, 75 yards away, it didn't matter. He'd put it right in the barrel. I tried it several times. I was lucky to get within 10 yards of the barrel. But he would drop those in there. When he was actually serving in the field, he was doing that into tunnels. He would drop the grenade right into the mouth of the tunnel. The first day as liaison with the ARVN Military Security Service, I met the commanding officer and my ARVN counterpart, which was, again, they made me a lieutenant because I was being a counterpart with a lieutenant in the Military Security Service in the ARVN Army. So I was the first lieutenant, and this is the MACV patch, by the way. They gave me this cluster of two flowers. That's the first lieutenant's bars. So I was a Trung Wee. From that point forward, I was Trung Wee Fisher, First Lieutenant Fisher, in the ARVN Army. That's my booty cap from Vietnam. So it's the one thing that survived. Everything else, nothing else fits me, so that's the only thing that survived. My main responsibility was to create daily reports on the nightly VC and NBA activity in the area. And based on the information from my Vietnamese counterpart, this mostly consisted of rocket and mortar attacks, which were constant in the area, and ambushes that might have taken place overnight, and any body counts, if there were any body counts. So anything really important, such as large VC movements or NVA movements, or bright lights, which were POW sightings. If any of those things happened or in any of those nightly reports, daily reports, I report that immediately. That got sent up to MACV immediately. They wanted to know those things. Otherwise, it was just a weekly report. Consolidate everything that took place over the week and send in a weekly report. One of those weekly reports I sent in included pictures showing a rocket attack at Camp Coryell, which they happen quite often, just about every night. The picture of a caved-in wall, the outer wall caved in on my hooch mate's room. So his whole wall caved in. The rocket hit just outside, so he was very lucky about that. And the other one showed my Jeep. My Jeep was parked outside the hooch, and a rocket hit underneath. So my Jeep ended up in a V shape with all 4 tires blown out. They weren't too happy with that. They had to replace my Jeep, so they weren't real happy about that. And the thing is, both of those explosions took place about 50 yards from my bed, and I didn't hear either one of them. I slept right through it. Those reports, the reports that I had to give in, sometimes a couple of those got me into trouble, and I eventually ended up having to be, I was called to Saigon. The officers at the 572nd Military Attachment at MACV wanted me to increase body counts in the reports that I refused. And they sat me down, and we went over reports that I had sent in for the last couple months, and they kept saying, we need to increase these body counts. I wouldn't do it. So they just kept me there and said, when you finish the body counts, let them go. After a couple of days, they said, get out of here. Go back where you belong. Because I never changed anything. And the thing is, that there's a lot of the details that are coming back now. There are a lot of times that body counts weren't very accurate and were increased just because people wanted, in the Pentagon, they wanted to have those higher body counts. So that was what was going on there. One of the things about being in Saigon is I spent a lot of time, the evenings and stuff, I could run around. I was in civilian clothes a lot. So I ran around in civilian clothes quite a bit, and also stayed at the 572nd Officers Housing Villa. They had a couple of houses in downtown Saigon, and I got the only star I got to see when I was in Vietnam, the USO show, was Mamie Van Doorn. They actually had her at the 572nd Villa, so I got to see Mamie Van Doorn. Like I said, there was a lot of reports that just seemed to me that they were outright ignored. Bombing 2 was hard hit during the Tet of '68, the Tet Offensive, and for everything we could gather, we knew that there were several people that were captured. There were military and civilian captives taken during the Tet '68 offensive, and there were even a couple of Catholic nuns. So we were always looking for reports of anybody seeing whether they saw the nuns, they saw the military people being passed around, whatever. We were always on the lookout for those type of reports of POW movements in Darlak province or in Tukor overall. I know that we had a Green Beret alert officer that would stop in at our offices every once in a while, stayed in our villa with us, and he was always out there looking for POWs too. He had a group that all they would do was try to follow up on the POW sightings that we were reporting. And we sent those reports in, but as far as we know, they were ignored. We never heard about any results, any rescue attempts or anything else. Even when we did have one, we had located a camp, and we thought we were going to be able to go in there and get somebody out, and we never had the backup to do it. So that was something that slipped through the cracks somehow. And I've found out that it wasn't just our type of reporting that was apparently ignored. One of the books that I've read was a thing called Breaking the Chain, Intelligence Ignored by military intelligence analyst W.R. Baker. And another one was None So Blind by CIA member George W. Allen. Both of those books, they talk about the reporting that was being done and the analysis that was being done in the field that never got passed through MACV. It never got passed beyond the MACV headquarters, which probably a bad mistake on our part. As you might know, gather from what I've said so far, I adjust and get comfortable with my surroundings pretty quick. So that's why I slept through a lot of different things that were going on in Camp Coryell, especially when I was at Camp Coryell. And even at the villa, we had at the villa, there was a small, about so long, python that roamed around the villa. And everybody ignored it. That villa, the python would end up a variety of different places. I hate snakes, but I got along with the python enough that they step over him if he was in the hallway, or step over him if he was at the door of my room or whatever. I also got used to the nightly parade at the hooch that I had at Camp Coryell. My bed was along the wall, and I had a rack built over to hold up the mosquito net. At night, invariably, every night, somewhere around 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, the rats would come through the wall, they'd go up the wall, and they come right across the center piece of my mosquito netting to go out the other side of the building. And that was it was a constant parade. Every night I could count on rats, shining a flashlight up there and watching the rats go across my mosquito net. Some of the things the odd things I saw while I was there at the camp, I saw a Huey that was flipped on its side and destroyed because the skid sank into the tarmac. And when it did, the helicopter flipped over, the blade went through the windshield and put a dent in the co-pilot's helmet, but nobody was injured. That was a close call there. And the local pilots that I got to know said that it must have been a rookie pilot to land on the tarmac, because in 100 to 110 degree weather, they knew that the tarmac would soften up. And I've even noticed that. I go try to run in the mornings and the tarmac would be sticking to my feet. You couldn't run on the tarmac. The local helicopter pilots always parked on the ground, on the dirt, in the dry season, and they parked on the tarmac in the rainy season. So they wouldn't have to worry about either getting stuck in the mud or getting stuck on the tarmac, one of the two. One of the 155th Assault Helicopter pilots was from Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, which is just across the mountain, just over the mountain from Penns Valley, where I grew up. So we kept each other up to date on what was happening back home. And when we met whenever we met at the officers club. And we got to know each other pretty good. And I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. I tried over and over again to try to figure out what his name was. But he took me out on several of his missions. He'd say, "You want to go out with me today?" And I'd hop in the helicopter and go with him. One trip, he took me on, he put me in the co-pilot seat, and after taking off and clearing the camp, he told me to take the controls and talk me through how to fly the Huey. So with one hand on the throttle and one hand on the stick and my feet controlling the rudders, I got to fly a Huey for about half an hour, which was something a little bit unique. I don't think too many guys in Vietnam got to do that unless they were pilots. And on another trip, I rode in the back, sitting on a footlocker full of M79 grenades and other arms with no seatbelt. And we were just out on a little flight mission. They were looking for a target, a VC target. Spotted the target, and we were hovering about, I don't know, somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000, some 2,000 feet or so. Hovering still, perfectly still, found the target, and then he told me, "Put your feet against the back of the co-pilot and pilot seats. Just brace yourself." So I braced myself, and he dropped the plane and went straight down. So I'm looking at the ground coming at me through the windshield, and the only thing I've got is my feet on the back of their seats, pressing like crazy to hold on. And they got down where it needed to, and he fired the rockets. The whole thing just lit up. I thought I was on fire. I thought the footlocker was on fire. I was ready to get out of there. But it was definitely an experience to be on that flight. After about 5 months of living at the camp, the number of men assigned to this 18CI was reduced, that the last two of us were able to move into the villa. So I finally got to move into the villa downtown. There were only 4 permanent members, and that, like the one Green Beret I talked about, it stopped in every so often. So during those last 3 to 4 months, 5 months of my time there, they kept reducing the number. People kept going home. At some point, somewhere between 2 and 3 months left, there were only 2 of us Captain Anderson and myself. We were the only two left there to submit the reports and hold down the fort there at the villa. With that, we were able to do our own travel orders, figure out what we were going to do, where we were going to go, and everything else. So I got to travel quite a bit. I went to a fire base on the Cambodian border one time and spent a day and a night there. And most of the time you were awake because the 105s were firing almost constantly into Cambodia. We knew of targets in Cambodia, and they kept firing at those targets. They didn't get much sleep on that trip. I also got to go to Da Nang for a few days of in-country R&R. I had some of my MI and language classmates were there. That's where they were assigned. So they gave me a tour of the area, and a place called Monkey Mountain, which is just north of Da Nang. They took me there. There was a fighter jet that was right into the mountain. The pilot had ejected, but he made sure that the plane was high enough that it would miss the city. So it didn't hit anything in Da Nang, but it went right into the side of the mountain. And it was buried part of the fuselage was buried in the mountain. I got to go to China Beach, and I also got to partake of Navy mess. And my dad was right. The Navy food was much better than the Army food. At least it was there in Da Nang. At the villa itself, back at the villa, basic operations kept going on. We did as much as we could. I kept going. My daily routine was to get up, go over to the MSS area, and get the reports that I need to get, consolidated information from the night before, and then go back and put the report together or send something into headquarters if I needed to. One of the things we got there was a USO tour show came in to bomb me to it, and there was a band, there's a Korean group, and the band ended up, the male members of the band stayed at the camp, the army base. The 3 Korean girls who were part of the show came to the villa and stayed with us. We had a couple extra rooms, so there was room for it. So the army was not too pleased. The army guys were not too pleased that we took the girls away, took them downtown. The villa was guarded by several mountain yards, and getting to know them and then getting comfortable with me, they finally invited me to their village. It was about 10 miles west of town. There I got to meet the mountain yard chief, see the village. They lived in longhouses that were on stilts. Very, very solid built houses that were very nice. Very strong to take care of above the weather and above the mud and everything else. And I got to enjoy some of their food, and they have rice wine. They had communal vases, basically vases about so tall, about so big around, and there'd be anywhere from 4 to 6 bamboo straws in those vases. The vases were filled with rice wine. So you'd sit around, everybody would sit around and grab a bamboo straw and start sucking on the rice wine. It was fermented in those barrels, in those vases. They hunted with crossbows, and I saw deer and other animals, small animals that they had killed with their crossbows. They had different size crossbows. I've got one that they gave me over here. This is one of the stronger crossbows. It probably is equivalent to a 120 pound crossbow that we might have here. A lot of the ones they used were smaller than this, probably half the size of this, that they used for their daily hunting. But they gave me this one, and these are the bamboo arrows that they use. They're all bamboo. And I saw this, with this one, the one gentleman loaded this up. This is the trigger here. Loaded this up, pulled this string back, got it locked in, put in an arrow, and then embedded one of these bamboo arrows into a tree, a very solid tree, and it went in that far into the tree, from probably about 20 yards away where he shot it. So the arrows themselves are very strong. I fired this a few times after I brought it home. It's it's got a metal bar in here and some wire wrapped around it now because I just practically just cracked because I wasn't maintaining it. I did keep it oiled and stuff like that to keep it flexible. So when I tried to pull it back one time, it snapped and I had to patch it back up. So it hasn't been fired since. But I was very honored that they gave me that. And they gave me, I think they gave me 6 arrows or something like that. They also gave me a brass bracelet that had been etched with the design on it and everything. I wore that, from the time they gave it to me, I wore that until it disintegrated on my wrist. It just finally wore down enough that it just fell apart. But I was very happy to get something like that. With that kind of bow, crossbow, they talked about the ability, they killed bear with those. They would kill, even one of the hunters had even taken down a tiger with one of those crossbows. So they're very powerful. My Vietnamese language skills weren't the best, but it did enable me to get closer to the people, which in turn enabled me to experience more of the Vietnamese and mountaineer culture. After moving into the villa, I was constantly eating banh mi sandwiches from downtown. Just go to the street vendors, order a banh mi sandwich, and I was good for the rest of the day with that. Or I go to in Banh Mi Tuot, there's a French bakery. I go there at 6 a.m. get the fresh bread. French bread that was baked right away. My MSS counterpart invited me to his house several times for dinner. Dinner was usually simple. It was either, fish or some type of fish and some rice and maybe a vegetable. But his wife was an excellent cook. And the one thing that she could make that I've tried with buying the ones that are packaged and stuff like that, they're just not the same, is the fish chips, the shrimp chips. This ground up shrimp with a little bit of batter and drop it into hot oil, and it would puff up and get all different kinds of shapes. And eating those fresh, it's like the best thing you've ever had. It was really good. And she could make those with no problem at all. She was a really good cook. There were a couple of MSS holiday parties and dinners that we got to go to. And one of the dinners that they had, I forget what the holiday was for, but they served a sheep's head stew. And the thing was, whoever got the eye of the sheep head was the one that was supposed to have good luck for the rest of the year. I didn't get the fish, I didn't get the eye, and I still had okay luck, so I'm not worried about that. But it was different. A lot of the food was simple rice and fish, like I said. There was a French expatriate that had a restaurant called the White Rat, and we used to go there. And he'd make real French onion soup. It was just delicious. It was always very good. There was all kinds of foods: whole fish cooked in banana leaves, dried squid, freshwater lobsters, and a daily routine for me at a local cafe. Once I got downtown, got to the villa, there's a thing called soda hatka. Soda hatka is raw egg, soda water, and sugar. And I had no problem drinking that at all. That was really good to get you started for the day. And I always knew that the eggs were fresh because they were gotten that same day, so you didn't have to worry about any kind of, I wouldn't do that here. I haven't made one of those. I have made them here, but only when I know that I've gotten the eggs from the chicken. That's when I made the soda hot pot for myself. In Banh Mi Tuot, the Vietnamese province chief's home was a villa that was used by Teddy Roosevelt on one of his hunting trips. And it was a beautiful house. It was all one level, but it had a very nice, beautiful garden in the back, and they also had a clay tennis court. So it was one of the things that they were very proud of in Banh Mi Tuot was that particular villa. And I tried to look it up, and I couldn't find it anywhere and anything. So I don't know after the war ended. I don't know if they destroyed that house or not, but I couldn't find it when I tried to do research on it in Banh Mi Tuot itself. The pictures I've seen of the new pictures of Banh Mi Tuot are very different from what I saw when I was there. On one occasion, the Army Military Security Service captured a Viet Cong assassin who was attempting to kill one of the province leaders. And his weapon was incredible. It was a piece of branch from a tree that was in the shape of a U-shape, something similar to a pistol. It was grooved out so you could put an M16 round on the branch, and a nail for a firing pin, and a very strong spring that they had gotten from somewhere that was the trigger. And that's what they were going to use to assassinate this Providence leader. But they were captured, and they showed me the weapon and everything, and it was amazing that it's wonder it didn't work, because it was set up to work perfectly. Just the fact that the spring had misfired and it didn't go off. It didn't hit the nail the way it was supposed to in order to make the round go off. But just a very lucky thing for that particular leader. At the end of my tour, I traveled back to Saigon by way of the Trang, where I handed in my lieutenant documentation and got my sergeant's stripes back. Mama San took the stuff off my uniform, put the other stuff on, gave it back to me, said, "You're on your way." Had to hand in, that's where I handed in my weapons and so forth. And the one thing that I did when I was leaving was I created my own travel orders to go back to Saigon. So I gave myself an extra day in Saigon. And so I created the travel orders. I got back to, I went to Saigon and spent a night in the nightlife of Saigon before I had to leave. And then I took out, left Poncelet Air Base, flight back to Oakland, California. I separated from the Army on January 15th of '72. I spent a day in San Francisco before flying home. I was told I had to report my status to the local draft board, and they told me I should apply for unemployment. The best welcome home I got, other than from my parents, was from my unemployment counselor. She said I was covered for 6 months, no problem. Didn't have to even look for a job. She said, all you have to do is come in once a month, pick up your check, and let me know you're still alive and you're good to go. So she gave me 6 months of unemployment right off the top. In the fall of '72, after that 6 months was up, I decided that I was going to go to school. So I attended American University for a year in DC, and then found out that my GI Bill money was dead because my records got destroyed in St. Louis. So I had to reconstruct all my military records. Fortunately, I had my DD-214 and so forth to go from there. I also attended, when I finally got that back together again, I had money that I could go ahead and I attended Montgomery College in Maryland for a year. I never did get a college degree. By going to school, I worked at a liquor store and I drove a taxi cab in DC. That was a unique experience of itself, driving a taxi cab in DC. I managed a deli on Capitol Hill we catered to congressional offices. When I moved back to PA, I worked as a bank teller in Hanover and then a bank manager in Gettysburg. I designed and built my own passive solar home just outside of York Springs and did everything other than the foundation. I did all the plumbing and electrical work and put the roof on the house. I then spent 32 years working with the digital dining POS system as a tech support, installer, and eventually corporate trainer. And with digital dining, from the corporate offices, I got to travel to just about every state. I've been to every state in the country except for Montana. But I've done installations of a variety of different restaurants and everything else all across the country. I retired in October of 2016, and in May of this year, I've been married to Pam, my wife, who's here, for 15 years. A couple of things I've got up here, besides my hat. I've got these two pictures. This is the sunset view that I had from my hooch at Camp Coryell. This is just the concertina wire, the barbed wire right across from my hooch, and this was the lookout, one of the lookout towers that was at the corner of the operation. But those are the sunsets that I got to see, and there were a lot of those beautiful sunsets. I took a lot of pictures when I was there, but unfortunately, in moving around, I lost contact with those pictures. So I don't have very many pictures at all. Those are the only two that I survived that I framed, but I know I had pictures of my Jeep, I had pictures of a variety of different things, different places I went. traveling around I printed this map out because it shows all these different air bases. I got to go to every one of these air bases from Consummate all the way to Da Nang. I've been to each one of these air bases at one time or another. And the city of Dalat, which is right, it's right under the Conrad Air Base logo. That Dalat is one of the most beautiful cities I ever saw. There's just the way it was laid out. It was around a lake around there with there's an island in the middle of the lake. It was one of the palaces from way back when was on that island. The one city that I didn't get to go to, that I would have loved to go to, was Hue. Hue is way up here in the top. And Hue was a former capital of Vietnam. And one of the capitals of Vietnam before it got separated. And it's supposed to be a beautiful city too, but I never got to go to Hue. But I've been to all those the places along the coast. The coast Vietnam coast was beautiful when I was there. It's supposed to be even much more beautiful now because they made it a resort. There's a lot of the area of Vietnam is now a resort with large, even the Trang. Pictures of the Trang are completely different now with all these high-rise resort hotels that weren't there when I was there in '71. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I hope that if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer any questions. I'll tell you wherever I can about anything else that I did while I was there.
Can you still speak Vietnamese?
What?
Can you still speak Vietnamese?
Not very much. I know Common Ong, which is hello, Chao Ba, which is hello for a lady, Chao Ong for a man. The fact that it's tonal, the word Bon, it's B-A-N, but the different inflections in your voice can either mean friend or shoot. So you have to be very careful. I never got that one straight, but unfortunately I didn't get a shot at. Yes, sir.
Chow Da Wee.
Chow Da Wee.
I remember those 3 words, and I don't know what they mean.
I'm not sure what they mean. I think it has something to do with goodbye, but I'm not sure what. Unless it's Da Wee, but Dai Wee is the Vietnamese for captain. Like I said, for me, Trung Wee was a lieutenant. Tiu Wee is a first lieutenant. So, but I don't know. I'm not sure about what you just said. The only time I got to really speak Vietnamese after being back was here in New York. The lady that started the Viet Thai restaurant. I think her name was, I think it's Bong Min. She was the one, I talked to her every once in a while. I'd go to the restaurant and I got to talk to her every once in a while. And she was always very friendly about helping me out. Yes?
When you had your bars, did you get lieutenant pay?
I know. My pay never changed. I had a badge and a piece of paper saying I was the first lieutenant. I had the bars, but I never got the pay. But
You're the fellow from back.
But the nice thing about it, the fact that we were, especially those last few months that we were on our own, the fact that I got to travel made up for it. I mean, I took advantage of my situation as much as I could, and I was very comfortable doing that. I had no problem going out to the 155th and say, "Where are you guys going? Can I go with you?" And they take me along. Or I go and get a 130 something that was going from Da Nang, I took us 130 to Da Nang. Coming back, I think I stopped at Pleiku and someplace else along the way back. Yes, sir.
I was up in the 2 Corps with the 4th Infantry
Okay.
Division.
Yep.
Outside of Pleiku, at Camp Inari. And there was mountain yards out around the camp. They had, the households on the stilts.
Right.
They had it like it was a telephone pole. It wasn't a pole, but it was just one pole with notches in it.
That was your steps.
That was how they got in.
That
Just
was
one
the-
pole, they would walk up that.
Yep, that was the ladder to get up to the still.
Yes, okay, that's,
Yep, I went up those steps quite a few times.
And did they do rat jerky? You didn't mention rat jerky. When I was down in your village, somebody wanted to give me rat jerky.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they're very self-sufficient. I mean, I don't know if they cultivated it or not, but the village that I was in, there was a patch that they had, I'm sure they cultivated it, but it was a patch of peanuts. And you go out and you pull up the plant, all the peanuts are on the bottom, they're all attached to the roots. And they either boil them or they just eat them as they were. They're not too good right out of the ground, but they're all right. But it's something that can sustain them. They had cornfields, and even the Vietnamese village, the VC farm when I was with that helicopter, we took that dive. That Vietnamese farm there were like probably a room. There was probably an area about the size of this room was a cornfield, and then there were some other plants along the other side, and there was only a couple of little huts. That attack that we made wiped out the cornfield and a couple of the huts. We never saw anybody there though. We didn't see anybody running or anything like that once we